A couple of brief examples of Bible prophecy. In Isaiah 53, there is a prophecy of the crucifixion of Jesus. Isaiah was translated into Greek before Jesus was born. This prophecy is so clear that a Jews for Jesus bigwig, before converting to Christ, thought Isaiah 53 was planted in the Old Testament by Christians. He then checked a Jewish Tanakh, and it was there too. Then another example in Daniel chapter 9, which was translated into Greek before the birth of Christ as well. In that chapter, there are certain facts about a coming Messiah, or the coming Christ, and Jerusalem that are prophesied. The precise interpretation of this passage is debated, but all Christians seem to agree what is clear in the passage, namely Jerusalem shall be rebuilt, and the Messiah will be executed several hundred years after that, after the rebuilding. This prophecy was given when the Jews were in captivity in Babylon. At the end of this captivity, the Jews rebuilt Jerusalem, but again, Jesus wasn't born until after this prophecy was translated into Greek, yet the Messiah was born and assassinated or crucified in the amount of time after the rebuilding of Jerusalem that was prophesied. Christ didn't come in 1000 AD or 50 BC. It was at the exact time prophesied, and there is no way the prophecy could have been written after the fact because, as I said, it was translated into Greek prior to the birth of Christ. The second point I wanted to make about anti-theistic prophecy, actually fortune-telling, is that even if the predictions are always clear and 100% accurate, what do they establish? They establish that the fortune teller knows the future. They do not establish that theism is false, for we already know, rationally speaking, that theism must be true. So if a fortune teller was telling the future to establish some pantheistic message, for example, we would have to reject their message. I don't think fortune tellers normally tell the future to establish such a message, but if they did, then we would have to not believe them. Alright, so biblical prophecy is unique when it comes to predicting the future, in that it is clear, definitely written before the fact, and always comes true. But only God can know what shall happen in the future. While the Bible is the word of men, the prophets and apostles, as I said before, it is also the word of God. And God certainly is able to get it right when he tells us what he himself is like. The fifth point, the resurrection. Like prophecy, the resurrection of Jesus is a specific example of a miracle. For the Christian, the resurrection is the miracle. Did the resurrection actually occur? Based on points 1 through 4, we can say that historically speaking, we are confident it did. But for our purposes here, I want to make it clear what the resurrection tells us. Among other things, it tells us that the message of Jesus, that is, the message Jesus himself taught, is in fact true. Jesus said certain things about God. Because he rose from the dead, that validates what he had to say about God. During his ministry, Jesus clearly taught that the Old Testament is authoritative when it speaks about God. Indeed, according to Jesus, the Old Testament is authoritative even when it's not speaking about God. Then, Jesus commissioned his 12 apostles to speak authoritatively for God. Indeed, the term apostle means sent one, and Christ sent the apostles to teach about God. More specifically, the apostles tell us about Jesus and what he has done for us, but included under this umbrella is the idea that God is the God of the Bible. As the apostles taught about God, the New Testament was written. According to Jesus himself, then, the Old Testament and the New Testament, or the Bible as a whole, is reliable when it gives specific information about God. And we know we can trust Christ because of his resurrection. But let's say a little bit more about the resurrection before concluding the proof for Christianity. Lee Strobel gives 5 E's, which are independent from a biased Christian reading of the Bible itself, which demonstrate, these 5 E's demonstrate that Jesus rose from the dead. The last 4 are as follows. A, empty tomb. B, early documentation. C, eyewitnesses, and D, the emergence of the church. Okay, A, empty tomb. It is a matter of historical record that the tomb which Jesus was buried in was found empty. Even atheists admit that the tomb was empty. If certain Romans and certain Jews, in authority, did not want the Christian movement to spread, and they didn't, all they had to do was to reproduce the body in the tomb. They didn't reproduce, so the tomb was no doubt empty. Moreover, the Christians themselves could have checked out the empty tomb after enough time had passed. If an entire religion is going to be based on a local historical event that just happened, the people promoting the religion at the peril of their life will want to be very, very sure the event did in point of fact occur. If the tomb was empty, we may ask how it got to be so. The authorities didn't steal it. The followers of Christ could not have stolen it because it was guarded by Roman soldiers. The only other possibility is resurrection. B, early documentation. There is a creed predating the New Testament which is quoted by Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. That creed is dated right after the crucifixion, perhaps within 5 years or less. This creed explicitly mentions hundreds of eyewitnesses to the risen Jesus, who were still alive for the most part and could be consulted about what happened. The dating of this creed is early even by non-Christians, so everybody agrees that the creed's early. This is also, all four Gospels were written before 100 AD, and they all claim that the resurrection occurred. This is well within the generation of the eyewitnesses of the resurrection. In ancient history, keep in mind, historical events were commonly recorded hundreds of years after the events actually occurred. Events surrounding the life of Julius Caesar, for example, were recorded long after he had crossed the Rubicon, and so on. C, eyewitnesses. There were hundreds of eyewitnesses to the resurrection. Many of them even died for their acceptance of the resurrection. This, in spite of the fact that nobody sympathetic to Christianity believed Jesus would rise from the dead, as best as we can tell, even after Jesus explicitly told them that he would rise from the dead. Prior to the crucifixion, he told them this. And even after eyewitnesses, reliable eyewitnesses, told them that they had seen Jesus, they still didn't believe. They had to see Jesus personally to know that what the eyewitnesses had told him was in fact true. C.S. Lewis said it best in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. If somebody makes a claim, no matter how incredible and hard to swallow, there are only three possibilities. The three possibilities we'll have to look at next time because we are almost out of time for this video. Shalom.